Second day post-lunch, I can see you're all very well fed. That's nice because we shall be starting to fulfill you even more with a great deal of views, expertise, and experience that will be shared from this stage. Starting post-lunch immediately is going to be the global Red Lentils outlook. Our panel is already ready, so I'm going to start to introduce them one by one as they step up on stage. And you can then, or they will rather, indulge us with their dissertations, and there'll be Q&A after you do that. Many of you have been asking what happens to the presentations. All of this will be uploaded on the website www.pulses2018, but wait for the end of this event before you start logging in and finding out more. Time to start, ladies and gentlemen. Up first is a gentleman whom you know very well. You'll see photographs of him either skiing on the toppest mountains in the world or jumping off the highest pinnacle he can find. He's also won so many awards, too many to mention, including the International Pulse Man of the Year, and also he's been mentioned in Forbes 100 people, 100 influential Indian leaders, so many amongst the many awards. He's also board member on the Dubai Food Trade Advisory Council and the president of the India Middle East Agri-Trade Investment and Investment Federation. Besides that, he also manages, as the managing director, a $1.5 billion conglomerate that's spread over 30 countries. That's Hakan Agro. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sudhakar Tomar. Up next is also a gentleman with a great deal of experience. So Sudhakar is a man of many talents. One of them, of course, he speaks extremely well and it's also a delight to listen to. I'm going to hand over to Sudhakar the mic, so he's going to welcome the panel in his inimitable style, and we'll start this session. Hold yourself.
Good afternoon. Hope you had a great lunch. Let me call my panelists first. Sanjiv, Mr. Rajendren, Quinton, Merve, Mr. Saif, please. And then once we sit down, we'll do nice introductions. Yeah. So welcome to Sri Lanka, as we say here, Ayu Bhavan, which is welcome. Vanakkam, Namaskar, Salam, Namaste, and good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most important panel considering Sri Lanka imports a substantial quantity of red lentils and probably the most important pulse of the day, red lentils. Can I get this slide on the... Okay, got it. So we are at a very interesting times, especially in the red lentils. Red lentils is very important for an important consuming country like Sri Lanka. But before we go into the red lentils, the format is like this. I have a dual role of analyst. It's a kind of conflicting role. Analyst as well as the moderator. But fortunately, I will be assisted very ably by probably the most influential panel of the whole conference. Why, I would tell you in a while. But before we do that, let me introduce my panelists first. On my immediate right is Mr. Saif. He is an industry in himself. I can't do justice by introducing him to anyone. I would reckon that in his life, he must have traded more than 50 million tons for sure. And it is still counting. That number is going to go up. After that, I have Merve from Turkey. She's a third generation trader and processor. Then I have my friend Sanjiv from Australia, as our president says, from down under. He has been exporting red lentils since pretty much 2 decades. After that, I have Mr. Rajendren, who's among the top 5 leading importers in Sri Lanka and a very large distribution center, and not only pulses, all kind of spices. So basically, when you eat the spicy lentil curry, all the ingredients, spices, lentils, everything come from his distribution setup. He's also our sponsor for the conference, other than, of course, Mr. Saif. And then I have Quinton, who is from Waitera and Glencore, and they are the largest exporter of lentils. So imagine this kind of expertise sitting in front of us. So any questions, whether they are politically correct or any confusion questions, even on the app or mic, please feel free to ask. This is your chance to get the best answers possible from the experts. So what do we get in this panel? In this panel, we'll discuss about the global production scenario. And after that, we will look at the availability of red lentils from now till the new crop in Canada, in Australia. So in next 12 to 16 months' time, how much is the availability of the red lentils or masoor whole in this 12 to 15 months' time. And then we will also look at the key demand from the major markets of Egypt, Sri Lanka, Turkey, other than, of course, the India, but let's discount that market for a while. And then you get a chance on one-to-one interactive session. You can ask as many questions as possible from the experts. But before I go there, I need to tell you some very interesting facts about red lentils. So we started doing research, then I realized that red lentils is very good. It's like a natural Viagra. So it is very good for making babies, and the proof is the huge population of India and Sri Lanka. And as if that is not enough, it is also good for lactating mothers. So we all have grown up in some part on the lentils. And it is a very old crop and a very secular crop. It has its origin in the Middle East, in the Mesopotamia region. It has been mentioned about 8,000 or 9,000 years old. It has been found in Egyptian tombs. It has been found mention has been in the Bible, also Hindu holy scriptures. So it is a very old crop. It's not a new crop. And lentil is one of the probably few food items which have inspired Hindi, Urdu idioms or sayings. Those who understand Hindi, Urdu, there is a saying called "Ye muh aur masoor ki dal," which means this face and you want lentil soup. So this was the food of the king of the kings. This was a regal food. So we are very fortunate to have consumed in abundance these red lentils. So the global trade flows of red lentils are about 8% of the global trade. So it's not a very major crop like beans or peas, but it is a substantially important trade flow of about 8% in the global trade. This is the harvesting and sowing calendar. So barring the month of January, pretty much whole year is a year of activity because you have multiple origins and many destinations. The font is small, but let me, globally, this year, the supply and demand is more or less like last year. In these figures, these figures will be available later on the YouTube or also in your presentation. Other than Canada, which also includes the figure for green lentils, and also USA, pretty much it's a supply and demand situation of red lentils. Canadian this year, there's a matter of debate how much is the carry from the last year, but the official number and the private sources, the number is anywhere ranging from 750,000 to 100,000. Please agree to disagree with me. So that's what is going to make a robust debate. So the carry is from 750 to 1 million, and with this year's of 1.6 or 1.7, you have good 2.78 million tons available till the next year, at least from Canada. Australian numbers are very interesting. The difference between the officially available numbers and what private trade thinks or perceives the difference could be to 250 to 300,000 tons. So more on that we will discuss with our experts. Indian red lentil official number is 1.2 million tons. How much is it the real or versus whatever is the data available from the government? That also we'll discuss. We have many experts here and also in the audience. These are Turkish prices for 10 years, probably historically lowest numbers in recent times. Similar fate from Australia, also from Canada. So now this is the general background. I will take you back to my original slide. So we are looking at about, in 2018-19 cycle, a sufficient abundant crop from Canada with the carryover of current year. With the carryover of current year from Australia and the new crop, about 650 to 700,000 tons from there. So now I will start with my most senior, most learned, my mentor, my guide, friend, philosopher, Mr. Saif. And I will start his slides so that he can give us some interesting insight from Egyptian market.
Good afternoon. Since I'm born in Sri Lanka and come from Egypt, I'll speak from an Egyptian perspective. Our figures that I've presented here are not any formal statistics. These are statistics we have formulated ourselves. Egypt has approximately a yearly consumption of anything from 90,000 to... Yeah. Good afternoon once again. I'll speak to you from an Egyptian perspective because we are processors in Egypt, and all the figures that I've shown there are figures that we have formulated as a company. They are not proven figures, but this is a fairly good estimate of where we stand as far as the Egyptian market and consumption of lentils are. We have an average consumption of between 90 to 120,000 tons of lentils per annum. If we were to break it up origin-wise, we import about 10 to 15% of that volume from Turkish origin, or maybe a little bit of Syrian, 20 to 25% Australian origin, and the bulk of the lentils comes from Canada. If you were to compare the processing facilities, and Egypt has become in the last few years, very capable of processing their own lentils. So we have seen the breakdown of processed versus split lentils in the percentage of about 10 to 15% of processed lentils comes from Canada, 20 to 25% comes from Syria as processed form, and the whole lentil market represents about 60 to 70%. The preference of the Egyptian consumer, like the Bangladeshi consumer, is for the smaller and the darker lentils that come from Turkey and also from Australia, the Nipper variety. If you were to take the last 5 years and compare the prices and the quantities, one would see... May I just have the next slide? The next slide.
Sorry for the interruption.
The last 5 years, we have seen a gradual variation depending on the price, the rate of exchange, and the international price of lentils. And you see the volumes, you can see from 2014 to 2018, even in spite of prices dropping, the consumption of lentils has fallen in Egypt. And this is a direct relationship to what happened about 16 months ago with the devaluation in Egypt. This was a result of an IMF deal that made Egypt rationalize its rate of exchange from a rate of exchange of almost 8 pounds to it went up to 18 pounds. And this has resulted in a significant drop of imports. And we see that as in the number that shows in the last 2018 figures, which is estimated to drop to 75,000. This number is also related because we had a cross-border trade in Egypt that we had the Sudanese market because of political reasons. The Sudanese market and the borders closed down, so that this number also is affected and has dropped to the number that we estimate this year. We go to the next slide, and we want to display to you that there is a substitution also happening in the Egyptian market because of what's happened with the rate of exchange. And people are not depending so much on lentils when they find cheaper substitutes. And here a relation is given with potatoes. Potatoes is, if you compare the price of lentils and potatoes, you can see that from 2014 to 2018, the price of potatoes locally have dropped to almost $100 a ton. And there has been some substitution. If you read the chart, you can see the relationship between the numbers and in Egyptian pounds, and thereby the drop in consumption. The most important thing that, unlike the other Middle East markets, the consumption of lentils in Egypt is not related to Ramadan consumption because Egyptian consumption of lentils is mainly in the winter and related to the colder months of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Saif Dada. That was very informative. And also very interesting correlation between the potatoes and, by the way, potato and lentils also make a very nice curry together as well. Okay. So then we'll switch the sequence a little bit. We'll go to then in origin, and then we'll come back to a key market. Quinton, tell us, how is this, especially the carry, the question of carry? There is a little bit disagreement about what is the carry, how much is the real. Give us some sense into that carry and this year's production, and how much is going to be availability of the red lentils in this season, and where all it can go.
Sure. Okay, so starting out on the production side for this past year, we believe the production figure was about 1.6 million tons in Canada. If you want to look at export statistics to figure out where that carryout figure should end up, exports from Canada at the end of March were down 900,000 tons year over year versus last year, with obviously India being the biggest factor there. Indian exports down over 470,000 tons. So the answer is, where does it go? Nowhere. I think it stays in some capacity. It will stay in Canada until the Indian marketplace does come back, and my belief is that it will come back in time. It's not in the next 1 month or 2 months, but in the next 8 to 16 months, I think you're going to see a more normalized program for exports to India. Not maybe the insatiable demand that we saw from a few years back, but a more normal program that would reflect 400 to 500,000 tons per year out of Canada. So looking at the crop year, we really only have 2 more months of exports to add to that, 2.5 months. I believe we will see a carryout of about between 700 and 750,000 tons. We have seen some growth in terms of pet food demand as well as the Mexican market that has added a little bit of a push, but nobody can make up for what demand we've seen for India the past few years. And I think with some of the growth in Kazakhstan acres as well as some of the volatility with currency and other political issues elsewhere, I do not see Turkey making up for an extra 300,000 or 400,000 tons to help us deplete our carryout in Canada.
And what is your estimation for the 2018 and 19 cycle in terms of production?
Yeah, so Statistics Canada released their report on April 27th. I think a lot of traders in Canada, not just pulse traders, but oilseeds and cereal traders would say there were major flaws in this report. As an example, many in the trade believe the canola number is wrong to the tune of 3 million acres. That's a pretty massive variance. So I think acres in Canada will be down between 17 and 20%. That is not enough to fundamentally change the story. So whether you want to say acres are down 10 or 15 or 20%, it does not matter. We do have a surplus in Canada. I think the more important story, it revolves around grower returns. At these prices today, growers are making zero margin whatsoever. So the interest for them to flood the market with supply is going to be significantly less than if values are, $50 or $100 a ton higher to help move that out of Canada. The second part of the story also is that if you were at the Green Lentil panel yesterday, Mr. Simpson discussed the fact that we have very low subsoil moisture in Canada. Seeding is delayed between 3 and 4 weeks in a lot of areas. So a lot of the growers in Canada will wait until the fall to market their product because they do not want to take on the production risk at these levels. So on that basis, I think you're looking at roughly a production number next year of between 1.3 and 1.4 million tons. So combine that with the carryout figure, you're looking at a little over 2 million tons of marketable red lentils from Canada this next year.
So from now till the next year's, this 17, 18, 19 cycle, about 2.1, 2.2 is the number. More on the pricing outlook and other things, we'll go on that topic a bit later. But then coming back again to a very key market, sitting on my right is Mr. Rajendren from Yarm Export. He will tell us why are so much lentils being consumed in Sri Lanka. This is like 80% of the market lentils.
Yeah, actually, in Sri Lanka, we all use it for morning breakfast and lunch and dinner. It's like a stable food. There is no any substitute for lentils in Sri Lanka. Lentils means they want. So we have to be.
And I must say, Sri Lankans are very clever people because they don't know which lentils to eat.
Yeah, sure.
So please give us some numbers, like how much is being imported, what is your outlook for this year?
And I think Sri Lanka is already, every year we need about 12,000 metric tons of whole lentils, and it's about 140,000, 136 to 140,000 metric tons of lentils we need. And I think mainly we are importing from Australia and Canada. So it's like continuously, I think for last 3-4 years, there is no any big difference between the importers. So.
And have you seen this production, this importation increasing or?
It's stable. It's like consistently it's about the same amount. But sometimes because of the duty structure, it was going on when the market was very high I think in 2015, you can see the market at that time some split lentils came in a big wave from India and from other countries. And apart from this, I think it's like we need about 12,000 tons every month.
I would reckon that Sri Lanka, given the population and the importation of red lentils, probably per capita consumption is one of the highest in the world.
Yes, highest.
As a single individual pulse, but more on that a bit later. Let me go back to, again, a key export market and a very, quality market of Australia. To my friend Sanjiv, who's technically and experientially very well qualified to speak on that topic.
Thank you, Sudhakar. Hello, everyone. Well, Australia has had 2 large crops. The year before last was fairly large, very close to 1 million tons, and all of it got exported out. There was hardly anything that was left behind. But I think what's made the difference in the past 12 months or so is the production last year, which is anywhere between 600,000 to 700,000 tons. There is a view that it could be less than 600,000 tons, but by and large suggests that 600,000 to 700,000 tons. But and also like Quinton referred to in terms of the carry stock, so Australia also faces that similar kind of an issue. Where we think that getting into the next year, it could be as much as 200,000 tons left over. So just to put it in perspective, 200,000 tons a few years ago, like 4 or 5 years ago, used to be the total crop of Australia. So carrying forward a total crop means a lot. And this is also just presuming that there'll be a consistent kind of a minimal export of about 30,000 tons in a month from now until October and November. So I think the key points that resonate from the origin of Australia is the oversupply, and of course the planting intentions, which would remain fairly consistent, but 20% down from last year. That's what we think. Its time is running out. Probably it's starting to get fairly chilly and cold in lentil producing areas. So the planting time is running out in another 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe 4. But that's what the expectation is.
And in terms of production, so we are looking at somewhere anywhere, depending whose number you decide, from 350 to 450,000 tons. Is that
in the coming year?
In the coming year?
Yes.
And 200,000 tons of carry, so about 650 to 600,000 tons of availability from now till December.
Could be.
Yeah. So add that to Canada, the Canadian number, so that gives some sense in terms of production availability of red lentils in the market. One question before we go that, and that's a very important thing. We're not blaming, but we say the quality of data is not reliable. We don't get enough good numbers either from India or from Africa or from Asia. But imagine the difference in a key structured country like Australia. There's a variation of 300,000 tons of production number. So these days it's getting increasingly difficult to pin down the right number.
Yeah, I don't think that there's the official figures that we talk about is an outdated figure. So they haven't yet updated revised yet. And what actually has happened is that South Australia forecast has been fairly close to what the total production was, but in Victoria the yields was kind of underestimated. Like I was seeing the figures of they were talking about just over a ton per hectare, whereas in reality it is almost about 2 tons per hectare, and so that explains the difference. So there is an explanation towards that.
So it's maybe a matter of time by the time they get it right. So now we go back to a very key market, which is producing as well as sometimes importing market, Merve. Merve is the 3rd generation trader and processor from Gozetarim, and also from my second home, Turkey, and one of the birthplace and influential region for red lentils. So please tell us how much is going to be the production this year, any hope of importation, and any key trends which you see in your market.
Thank you, Sud. Hello, everyone. Well, let me start with the shocking news. We have carryover also. What we are thinking is that we have currently 100,000 tons of red lentils in inventories. And if we come to why, the traders and the stockists, they bought red lentils at high prices with an expectation of inclining market. However, it didn't come out that way, so this created the current situation. About the new crop, so the new crop is about to start in 10 days, and we're expecting it to end around mid-June. And there was no bad news about the weather. The rainfalls came at the right time. The sun came out at the right time, especially in the flowering period. So we are expecting the field yield is going to be good. It's, I can say, for 1 kilo seed comes out as 7 kilo whole red lentils. So with this yield, we're expecting around 350,000 tons of production. And this is with a 20% to 30% decrease in planting area. So with the good yield, it's balancing the decrease in the planting area, that's what I can say. So we are expecting to start new season with 400,000 tons with the carryover. That's what I can say about the production for this year.
And what about import prospects this year?
So what we have imported is around 300,000 tons. This is what we import usually. And this is what we expect actually next year too, if the prices will match, let's say. But this year what was different is, so we imported from Canada, Australia, and Kazakhstan. This year only 1/3 came from Australia and Canada, and 2/3 came from Kazakhstan. And this is not only because the yield, this is because of the price, because also we have devaluation of Turkish lira against US dollars, and this is affecting our imports.
Of course, so the take-home message is about 300,000 tons of imports, provided prices remain reasonably okay to be imported. Mr. Saif pinned it down to about 75,000 tons this year, 130 to 140,000 tons from Canada, from Sri Lanka. So these are the numbers from the key markets. We will not avoid one question of pricing. So we will go back to all of us, because it's a very balanced panel. We have two importing countries, processors. We have one processor and importer and trader. And we also have 2 origin countries. So it's a very balanced. So we will go back in the pricing outlook, pin down the number in terms of per metric ton, what we can expect, with and without the big elephant in the market, if India remains in the market or if it doesn't remain in the market. So we'll look at both the scenarios. So, and then of course we have plenty of time to question answers. Please start thinking, Slido, or whichever way you want to ask. We all are here to discuss. We would like to make it as interactive as possible, not only related to pricing, outlook, production, or other aspects of quality, exportation, trade barriers, everything we can talk about it. Quinton, what do you think will be in 2 scenarios, the price? If India comes back in the market, like what they did last year, in terms of pricing, give us because sometimes a FOB number for red lentils, say number 2. What can happen in next 6 months' time with or without India scenarios?
Okay, you want a FOB number or you want a CNF number?
CNF is better?
CNF is better. Okay, so on the CNF side, I think without India, obviously currency is going to be a major factor. I think that's what everybody at this conference is talking about, whether you're from Turkey or Canada or Australia. That'll be a major influence on pricing. If you look at charts right now for the Canadian dollar, we're in the lower part of the range, so you could say there's some risk of 3 to 4% increase that way. Of course, Mr. Trump will likely have some influence on those things.
You have to be watchful at 3 a.m. tweets, huh?
Yeah, I have him on Twitter, so we'll watch that closely. But without India, I think you're talking about between 400 and 450. I think you've already seen bulk vessel rates increase by about 20%. We have not seen that happen yet on the container front, but I think that's a risk that people have to be aware of, that container freight rates could increase into the fall and particularly into 2019. Grower values without India will likely be fairly flat, so that's why I would say 400 to 450 is realistic. If you have India coming into the tune of say 500,000 tons globally, I think within the next 8 to 12 months, I think you're going to see a price migrating towards $500 to $525.
So similar prices, Rajendra, are for Colombo as well, because the freight is in containers, would be similar. Yes. Would these prices make you happy because you're in buyer's market? Don't say you want it for free.
No, actually, sure. Actually, now, mostly I think this price is very comfortable for Sri Lankan market, because today only the government has announced the duty structure. They have put the duty for whole lentils and split lentils. I think 7 rupees, earlier it was 1 rupee and 3 rupees, and today is 7 rupees and 12 rupees. Because earlier there's a gap only 2 rupees between the split lentils and the whole lentils. So from today it's 5 rupees. I think more whole lentils will come into Colombo rather than the split lentils. And this is a quite cheaper price, I think, after a very long time. And this is a very comfortable price for...
This is a very nice news to exporters like us. Please know, somebody is saying this is a good price. I don't want prices to go down more. Very nice. Sanjiv, where will you put down the number from Australia?
I think the general consensus
without in India scenario.
Yes, the general consensus is of oversupply, and we're talking about carry stocks and all. So I think it's the whole market is going to be driven to that until unless something drastic happens. So we do feel that yes, there is a resistance towards, well, there is always grower resistance on selling at lower prices, but I think 400, 450 is probably where the market should be on a CNF basis. So with so much of stocks and the production still to come up of 2018, we probably just have no other outlook to try and see in case if there's going to be any firmer price. But probably 450 or so.
Merve, what is your expectation from a key importing as well as re-export market, Turkey? Are these prices, you see a lot of business happening, or you think that the possibility of doing importing at these levels is big? From the two key origins, you have the number.
Well, so this is really hard to say. What we are aiming is 400 levels keep like this currently. We all like to see an inclining market, of course, to gain money. But with the current situation in Turkey, we are expecting the elections also. So it's really hard to predict. So that's why I can't say a price right now.
Saif Dada, what is your take? What will make you happy?
Obviously, a rise in prices would make us all happy because it gives the whole supply chain an opportunity to make money. But one thing that's strikingly, surprisingly, one would have thought that with the lower prices, consumption would increase. We have not seen that happening in Egypt. So this is the big surprise for us. I mean, these prices are record low prices. We hope that it may be a slow start, but it may trigger better consumption patterns we as a company and are promoting different usages of lentils, and I hope that with these prices, because we are very record low prices also in compared to what we have been importing in the past, and maybe this could trigger some long-term demand and higher consumption.
It's a very important message he's giving here. He's saying we need to increase the consumption and also find alternative usages. The diversification of the demand is a key criteria, not only for red lentils, but for all the pulses. And as your confederation has done an amazing job in finding new markets, avenues, destinations for all pulses, red lentils included, but more needs to be done. And that per capita consumption needs to be increased as much as possible. Right now we are less than 3 grams per person per day globally. That needs to go up. So now we have lots of time. Please, if we can have questions, I'll be looking at my phone. If we have questions, we can put them on the screen. So the first question which has come is very interesting, and it says, if I understand it correctly, it says, would you explain me how many percentage of red lentils you get from Russia, Turkish, Canada, Kazakhstan, and EU, probably Australia? Very good. So I think the best person to answer this, we have 3 very good panelists. Saif Dada, would you like to take this? The recovery percentages from these different lentils from Turkey, Russia, Canada, and CIS countries?
For us,
give us in the serial, like number 1 to
as a preference, as a miller, we find that the best value comes from splitting from the Australian lentils, and we are, as a splitter, find that we have more consistency with Australian lentils. The Canadian lentils have been questionable with the weather and years when we have had quality issues with the crop. We find that we as a miller really don't know how to calculate our yield when we are buying lentils, because the grading is so common and so inconsistent that one cannot really value Canadian lentils when there is a quality issue. So I think the best value in terms of yield, moisture, and splitting yield for us is the the Australian lentils.
So that's number 1 in your
Yes. Canada has a very good usage in the whole lentil market, which is a good percentage of our market because of its skin color and size, but that represents about 20% of our consumption. So number one comes Australian, number two is Canadian. Kazakhstan and Egypt do not have a phytosanitary agreement, so actually we have not really been able to test or use Kazakhstan lentils in Egypt. Some lentils from Kazakhstan have come in to Egypt as split from Turkey, but not declared as Kazakh origin.
And Merve, you must have experience of processing Kazakh lentils. Can you tell us something, how has been the quality? Because one thing which the industry has been very good is in exploring new destinations and new origins. So CIS countries, Kazakhstan, Russia have come out as a new supply source. And we would like to hear how has been your experience in terms of quality.
If I have to compare as a quality, I will go with the yield. And the Canadian yield is around 82%, and Australian is around 84%, so it's 2% differences between them. The Kazakh yield is around 75%, so it's pretty much lower comparing to the other red lentils. But in our import this year, the price is over quality. So that's why most of our import was from Kazakhstan.
So, but do you see it becoming a substantial origin and competing with other origins if you get the right price from the origin?
I can say hardly yes.
That's good to know. I have a very interesting question here. It says, when can India to be back in the market, given next general elections, current local stocks, expected local production, and current and expected prices? So it's like 10 questions into one. I think I'm the only one here who's because there's nobody from India. So first of all, this very, very dangerous to be calling ourselves or anyone expert. So before I answer this question, I'm going to tell you a short joke. So once a very intelligent farmer was from Saskatoon, was walking in his farm, and he saw a frog, green frog. Green frog says, I'm an Indian expert. If you kiss me, I'll turn into a human being, and I'll give you the right predictions for you. So the farmer listens to him and ignores him, but he picks him up and puts him in his pocket. After 5 minutes, the frog says again, hey, I'm the India expert. I'll tell you what is going to happen there. And you'll make money because the biggest market, 33% of the global pulses trade. So the farmer again ignores him. Then finally, the frog sweetens the deal. He says, I'm a frog. I'm an expert on India. And also, I didn't tell you, but I'm a woman. So I'll be a lady expert. And on Indian matters, so I'll also become a wife. So the farmer says, a talking frog is more interesting than anybody pretending to be expert on India these days. So with that caveat, we have demand. People are eating lentils in India. Consumption is there. Demand is there. It's just that because we have so many tariff and non-tariff barriers with 30% input duty. But these stocks, I was discussing with some of our colleagues and friends. So we feel that September, if all things remain equal, duty remains at the same level, there is no additional new barrier, we feel September onwards India might come back in the market. So that is a good news, at least from the producing side, India coming back in the market. Some weather concerns from Canada, cost of production being higher. So there are 3-4 things which at least the exporting community have some comfort to look at. So September they can come back. How much will they import? Quinton says 500,000 tons. So anywhere ranging from 500 to 600,000 tons, it could be a possibility of imports. Yeah. If anybody else wants to take a call. please, on this question, I'll be very happy. Do you think there could be a government hand to reduce of production of oversupplied reds? I think, again, it's being referred to India. If yes, of course, it's very obvious. They want to, given the election year, next year, the farmers, the idea is to remunerate the farmer as much as possible, because one thing which we have to be cognizant, we have to remember, is that 70% of Indians live in villages. They are directly or indirectly dependent on agriculture. So for any government, it is very important to give them enough remuneration. And to do that, the approach, the intent is genuine, but approach sometimes becomes very convoluted, especially for when we talk about things on international market. So they will try to do everything possible to make the prices of pulses in the local market up, and for that all kind of government intervention will be used till the time prices reach the desired level, which is close to minimum support price, which government has promised that farmers should get 50% over the cost of production. Turkish currency going crazy. Do you think Turkey imports again with this currency? Because today Turkish price in Canadian in the same in US dollar. Merve, do you want to take this? Do you think with the current currency prices, the exchange rate, if it goes down more, will that reduce the imports in Turkey, or do you think that basic demand, because it is also dependent on re-export, will that remain in the market?
Before answering your question, I should add this. Turkey doesn't import because of its local market. What Turkey imports, it re-exports like 80% of it, because Turkish people eat mostly Turkish red lentils. Because of the quality, they prefer Turkish red lentils. But what we import, with the inward processing regime, we are re-exporting it. So this is why the price is the most important thing when we are importing. But if the demand is more, and if the Turkey sees this as a position, then the import quantity can increase. Correct.
There is a very interesting question here. It's there on the screen, so I have to say it. To Glencore, how many countries you have problems about chemicals and GM? I think this is not the right forum to have this kind of question, because my colleague on the right is representing Red Lentils panel. So I think if we limit ourselves to specifics to that, rather than discussing something which is not relevant, but I would like to take this question. Do you think 2005 levels coming back again of $300 metric tons? India is the big elephant in the room, but no one on our panel. Yes, I acknowledge that mistake. We had invited some key people. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here, so that's why we are taking the brunt of all those questions. We'll be happy to do that. And also, a very interesting question, what is the cost to farmers to grow lentils in Canada? I think this question was already answered in the Green Lentils panel, that the current prices are pretty much standard average cost of growing in Canada. And how long farmers can hold the crop if they don't get the right price? So maybe Quinton can take this question. How long can they hold the crop if they don't get the right price, or the price below the cost of production?
You want me to answer all those questions or just the one? I'll go with the last one. Farmers in Canada can store an entire year's crop. So in terms of storage itself, they can do everything. That's not an issue. What we've also seen is that their canola stocks will be depleted at the end of this year. Their carryout will be fairly tight. Barley stocks, because of the strong feed demand in China, will be very low as well as malt barley too. And even our pea carryout stocks that once appeared to be burdensome will be far less than we thought. So growers can store it physically. From a cash flow perspective, they are very comfortable as well. And when you look at red lentils, how they store, and particularly this year with low moisture being between 11 and 12%, the risk to the grower is also lower. So it's not that there will be zero sales at today's levels that are barely break even, and in some cases losing. They will want to get a bin back for fertilizer, or they may want to move a little bit just to keep things flowing, but they can easily store this crop. We saw this back a little over 5 or 6 years ago, where we had sequential years of over 500,000 tons of carryout, and I think the Australian grower likely you'd say a similar thing. So if they don't like the price, they will wait. If you look at this year's carryout, we're not $10 or $20 or $30 away from price ideas for half the growers. We're like $100 a ton away from their ideas. So they will be willing to store the crop even if the values go up $50 a ton.
Yeah, we're talking about influential farmers. They have holding power. They can, and last few years have been very good for them. So they have enough appetite to hold the cargo as well. A very specific question. How much quantity has been exported from Australia so far? Has been asked by a friend and colleague. Sanjiv, how much, what do you reckon would be?
Yeah, well, these are official statistics, and the Australian Bureau of Statistics, so it's fairly accurate. And until March, there was about 260,000 tons that was exported. We think that we estimate another 200,000 tons to go out by October. And that's the reverse calculation where my figures came out that in case if there's a 600 to 700,000 ton crop of production, there'll be a carry forward of 200,000 tons. So it's about 260,000 tons exported out till date. Till end of March, actually.
There is a question, Merve, do you expect Kazakhstan to continue to increase production at current low levels? Because you have experience of, the prices are low, but do you think they will increase more at these prices, or because the prices are so low, they will limit the production?
Like you're asking me the prices, about the prices?
The question is, do you expect Kazakhstan to continue increase production in Kazakhstan because the prices are low? Because when the prices are low, farmers tend not to, plant and...
Yes, actually, if Kazakhstan increases its production and Canada and Australia lentil levels are too high comparing to Kazakh, then Turkish people can keep importing Kazakh lentils. So I can't say for sure, but it will be okay to increase their production also. But right now we have oversupply, so I'm not sure if this is a good idea for this year.
Yeah, there is always a correlation between the prices which a producer gets versus the production he does. Unfortunately, what happens, they do it in the same linear year, which is the problem all over the world, but unfortunately that is the reality. A very interesting question has come for Saif Dada. I'm having a problem in reading that because by the time I go down, it just pulls me. The questions are coming at a very fast pace. I think this is a very interactive session. There are like hundreds of questions. He says, would you be willing to pay the price, a premium to good quality Turkish and other lentils if it has right and good Egyptian-friendly flavors?
We definitely pay a premium for Turkish lentils, and we have paid up to $200 as a premium for the preferred Turkish lentils. The Egyptian consumer very clearly understands the flavor of Turkish lentils, like the Turkish consumer. And with that difference narrowing, the spread narrowing, we are going to be, in my opinion, seeing more of Turkish lentils being consumed in Egypt. The reason for the preference, like the Turkish consumer, the Egyptian consumer definitely prefers the small, darker red lentils with flavor. And that comes from the Turkish lentils, which we don't see very much in the Canadian lentils.
That's good to know that if the right flavor profile and the characteristics which a destination market needs, if it's available, then we can get some premium. So all the quality processors, please take note of that. There's a very nice question and valid question. With an Indian production estimate of 1.2 million tons, which comfortably covers the demand for the year, why would there be a requirement for any imports at all? You want to take that?
Sure. Number one, I don't think the production is 1.2 million tons. I think there's probably a lot of people in this room that have questioned those numbers, which, when you look at receivables into the domestic market, they do not equal those types of levels. And a lot of years that they barely reach those levels even with the imports. So I think, although that's roughly the consumption per year, I think that is not what the production will be. You talk about dryness in Australia, you talk about dryness in Canada. There's been obviously some deficiencies in rainfall in India as well, with reservoir levels relatively low. So I think to say that India will produce 1.2 million tons of red lentils this coming year, I would bet against that personally.
So it depends. If you rely on that number, then of course that answers the question. I think we have pretty much answered all the questions. Let me just go through one more time. I don't want to leave anything. Any other questions from the list you guys want to address? Because we have a couple of minutes. Or I think we have addressed quality. Any concluding remarks? I think we can start with Saifuddin. Any concluding remarks, considering in a nutshell, 2.2 million from Canada, 650,000 tons from Australia, 75,000 tons import, 300,000 tons from Turkey, 130,000 tons from Sri Lanka, our host country and the most beautiful country. I like the spicy lentil curry and appam and sometimes. And also India, potentially from India about 550 to 600,000 tons. If we can have some concluding remarks from Mr.
Well, with these low prices, I hope we can trigger demand, and we are going to look at all ways to try and push towards triggering more and more demand. That's all I can say.
Merve, any nice thoughts which can make the market red lentils more vibrant? Any remarks?
I think everything is pretty much said.
Well, I think the key note has been of oversupply and a certain amount of production and all. So, and prices are low. Let's just hope that consumption picks up. Like Saif said, that consumption, we really don't understand the reason why consumption is not picking up at these low prices. But that's probably the hope.
Quinton?
The one thing I would just say is that I think this past year has demonstrated to a lot of people the importance of diversification in these markets, and I think I would echo your comment from before in terms of whether it's GPC or people like Pulse Canada or Pulse Australia, going out and actively promoting these products. We're seeing some traction in that in terms of ingredients business, fractionation type business, pet food as well in North America, and I think although we are talking about oversupply right now, to me, this industry does need to continue to grow. I think Kazakhstan does need to continue to have growth long term as well. And although we talk about it as a threat and an issue maybe for Australians or Canadians right now, I completely believe that 10 years from now, we'll need triple the acreage there. I think the acreage in Canada and Australia is sustainable. It's just that we're a little bit ahead of the curve right now without any major weather problems, but 5 and 10 years from now, we will be talking about this as a sustainable production level and sales level.
Your host?
Yeah, if India is not buying, really it will affect the entire world. Because if they stop buying and if they are not interested, and if they have a good crop, and it will affect actually the whole, even though if you are keeping the stocks, so how long we can keep it. So if it is true, if the 1.2 million tons is I don't know, Mr. Quinton says it won't be a correct figure, but if it is a exact figure, maybe about, we can say about 30-40% plus or minus, but even if it is about 800,000 tons.
That gives you 500,000 tons.
So that's enough for, I think, Indian requirement.
But one thing we all can do, I don't know how many of those in today's lunch tried the delicious lentil curry. This is made from red lentils. Although it looks yellow, but it's red lentils. I had 3 helpings. If we at least even during the course of conference have 2-3 helpings, that will definitely help us for sure. Thank you very much. It's an amazing panelist. It's very rare that we get so many intelligent people together, other than me.
Wonderful panel once again. We will take a memento photograph as the official photographer. Thank you once again, panel. Wonderful. Thank you, Sudhakar. Wonderful as usual. This session was sponsored by Armada Foods,